Hello there, Force of Will players, and welcome back to another video. Today, we have another spoiler set for you. It's all the spoilers we've got since last Friday, so we're going to be going over those today, and I will give you my thoughts on them. So, going right on into it, we started here, I believe. Yeah, because we did Dodgy and Tiger and Dragon last week. So we'll start here, and then these are in chronological order from the order they were released. Big thank you to James Mount for adding a spoiler tag, as well as the order they were released in option for his website for Force of Wind. Makes it a lot easier for me to go through this in like the order that we've seen them. So starting off, Zweihander. We've already seen Zweihander. He's one of the promo cards, so I won't go over him too much. It is interesting how just the Typhon mechanic, basically. So we're getting a lot of blue machines, which is what machines is normally in, the color they've been in for the past 8 million years. It's either void or blue. So we're getting these blue machines, but Typhon has to play darkness cards, so all the blue machines become relegated to Typhon's sideboard. So it's giving us kind of like a mix of cards. Dragonflame also can make use of some machine cards, like we saw last week with Tiger and Dragon. But primarily the machine mechanic is more revolving around Typhon. So it's neat to see them kind of making that kind of stuff, right? Where we have, like, for example, Zweihander. I can play it in my normal machine deck. In just a machine deck with Maria Bella's Works and remote control beasts and stuff like that. But I can also play it in my Typhon deck, right? But yeah. Terminator Drone. So Terminator Drone, new card, a quick cast machine 1-drop, 100/100, enters the field, draw a card. When it's destroyed, you can put a resonator your opponent controls on the bottom of your deck, and when it's revealed from outside the game, target J-Res cannot attack or block, and its controller cannot play its activate abilities until end of turn. Kind of interesting. It's nice that it replaces itself and puts a machine in play. You're trying to get multiple machines into the grave because of Union 7 machines. Some cards do have that, so you want some form of Terminator Drone. The other thing is we don't really have a lot of impactful 1-drop machines. They just haven't really existed in the past. I think the old one that a lot of people used to play for machines type decks was Mechanized Soldier, which was like a 300 with like first strike. So if you're competing against that, you're probably going to be better than it. And then other ones would be like the 1-drop Guinevere, the 1-drop Vivian, were the blue ones that got introduced in Alice Origin? No, New Valhalla. So Terminator Drone does have quick cast though, which I don't think any other 1-drop machine has. So it allows you to kind of hold up mana and then go into your 1-drop machine, and then kind of keep going. Again, we also saw mechanization from last time, where you can kind of cycle through different costed machines. So it's nice to have Terminator Drone in some form of capacity if you're trying to play a machine deck. And because of all the stuff that machines are getting, especially blue machines, that deck might be a lot more prevalent, and it might be something I'll look into for a potential Wander Wednesday once the set releases. Spirit of Growth. So this is an Athenia card. It's versus Spirit of Decay, so it's kind of like the opposite of it, right? Single, green, 1/1, enter, you gain X 100 life, and you put X +1/+1s, where X is the number of cards in your removed area. So Athenia works around the moving your cards between your RFG and your grave back and forth in order to maximize her potential effects. The way you do that the most prominently, currently we have Mikage and the Tree of Life, I think, is the one that adds back to your grave. I could be wrong on that. Or the Wind Tree, I don't know if it's actually Tree of Rebirth, I think. But one of the trees adds back to grave, one removes from grave. So by adding back to your grave, you can get all the graveyard effects. By removing from the grave, you get all of the RFG effects. So it's to try and keep it looping in order to maximize all the effects that you want in a given turn. And then you can remove a +1/+1 counter from it to give a J Resonator +200/+200 until end of turn. It's okay. It's not super impactful. You probably won't end up playing it in an Athenia-style deck. You potentially could for like the life gain, but there are other cards that gain life, so Spirit of Growth isn't that prevalent, and just pumping and not giving counters doesn't synergize with anything in the deck. So, Algernon we've also seen. He's the other promo card. A quick note about Algernon. He works really well with the decks that are cheating mana, except specifically the Miles deck and the Nyarlathotep style decks, because they actually put stones into play. So they're constantly putting stones into play, which means they're not playing under their stone count, but like up mana, like they don't have fake mana basically. So Algernon does not work very well against those decks. Excuse me. However, his revolution effect is quite prevalent against them, because it makes it effectively count as if there would be 0, right? Because with Mylest, you're playing with another ruler. With other tag, you're playing with another ruler. So their cost gets even further like amped. So we've seen quite a fair bit of what Algernon would be good against, what he kind of counters, but I don't think Algernon is good enough on his own to warrant those decks still potentially existing after a ban list coming forward. If you want my other thoughts on Algernon, you can look at the original video that I did with him, my first spoiler set. Darkness of Zeus. So with Darkness of Zeus, the only ones we're missing is Fire of Zeus and Wind of Zeus, which we really need to know what Wind of Zeus does. I could care less what Fire of Zeus does, honestly. Because Wind of Zeus is probably some form of mana cheat. Wind typically is, so or it might be a cancel. So we'll see. But your opponent removes 2 cards in their hand from the game. Very powerful. It's a +1 in value, right? You use 1 card, you get rid of 2 cards. The only bad part about this would be your opponent gets to pick. So they get to pick whatever cards that they want to RFG, and then in some cases they can RFG cards that say they can play them from the RFG, right? Like if they're playing Violet, they can RFG like a Maria Bella Heart Talk in their hand, and then they can play that Maria Bella next turn. If they're playing something like Athenia, they can move all those cards to their grave, work around what they're doing with it, right? You just gave them more fuel. So it could potentially have negative implications, but typically playing for value is very strong, and also because Zeus is singleton, you're probably going to play this to loop between all the other elements. Anyway, Hades, the 4th Olympian. This is the most powerful Olympian. So we've seen 3. Hades is the 3rd, not counting Zeus, right? So we've seen Poseidon, we've seen Apollon, and now we've seen Hades. So Apollon is like kind of like a game ender tempo type deal. Poseidon is a value card, a very strong value card. Hades is a interaction type card, right? Because he has target J-Res loses all abilities, and then you destroy it. And because of Zeus enters the game of gods, just your revolution in general, you do get to proc this effect pretty regularly. So it's kind of like it's almost like Gradius and Dark Prom together, which is very strong. Again, the deck is singleton, so you kind of have to work around that, and you would have to find a way to cycle Hades back into the deck in order to get multiple activations off of it, off of Zeus enters the game of gods, or something like just Order of the Olympians, just revolutioning Zeus. But that one effect is quite powerful. It gets around Eternal, right? Stuff like that. And then he just has tap, destroy target J Resonator, so Hades just can cycle through and kill things while in play as well. And then Union 7, it's all Union 7, it's not Revolution. For new 12 Olympian gods, rulers your opponent controls lose all abilities. That is actually super impactful. I'm honestly shocked that's on a card. I don't think we've ever had anything within recent memory, maybe something back in like old Valhalla, that really interacted with rulers just getting blanked, like just not having effects. I know Blazer, 4-drop Blazer from Alice Origins does it, but he has to kill a J ruler. Hades can just do it without them ever flipping in the first place. So there are a couple things with Hades. One, it's very good against Belial, right? So they can't no longer prevent themselves from losing the game. They can't God Art, they can't do any of that. And then it's also very prevalent against Dante, because it prevents Dante from having his field effect just always applied, right? Because if Dante activates and then you Hades, the Dante will be blanked over, which means its effect won't be active until the Hades would leave the field. So it's very impactful in that sense. If Carlina was still around, it would be very impactful against Carlina. She wouldn't be able to tap for Will. However, and this is the thing with the fallen angel rulers, it will get rid of all of their negative effects, right? So, for example, Carlina, if she were still around, she couldn't tap for mana, but she can now play more than one guard per turn. Astema, right? It won't get any of the automatic trigger effects. However, you can now lose the game. So there are instances where you want Hades to kind of play around with that stuff and not necessarily like have it in play potentially. And then enter destroy all magic stones. So destroying magic stones is a very interesting game style. It's resource denial, right? In Magic, it's Ponza. We've kind of had stuff like that in the past with I kind of made a deck list on it for Wanderer Wednesday with Time Spinning Witch using Bloody Moons and things like that. However, those primarily hit special stones, which most people play, but sometimes people just play basics. In this case, Hades hits all of those. It even hits basics, right? The other thing with Hades destroying all magic stones, it'll also hit yours. However, what's really important about that is if you remember the Light of Zeus, we'll actually scroll down. I think it was fairly recent. You can give any number of target entities eternal. This means you can give all your stones eternal before your Hades blows up the board, right? So you can keep yourself at full stone count and then nuke all your opponent's stones down. And typically, if you get to pull that off, you're probably winning the game. Like, just full stop. Again, you'd have to have 7 different named new 12 Olympians in all public zones. However, it's a very powerful kind of game-ending effect, which quite a few of the Olympians, like the 3 we've seen, kind of have. Because you get like a free resonator from your grave with Poseidon, as well as 3 more cards. Apollon just makes your board huge. Hades nukes all magic stones. So if we keep kind of seeing these Union 7 like end gaming type effects with the Olympians, the deck might be incredibly powerful. Like, it might just be, instead of hitting a stone count or anything, as long as they hit 7 names in public zones, the game might just be over. So it'd be interesting to look forward to. Again, because Zeus is singleton, you're playing one of this. It's fine. There's no reason not to. All right, Tree of Growth, that's what it's called. But we'll actually do Tree of Growth first. So Tree of Growth is the opposite of Tree of Decay. You can play it for free as long as you don't control another card called Tree of Growth, but you have to be on Rebirth, which Rebirth is the revolutioned or flipped side of Athenia. It's the Order of Death and Rebirth, I think is the full name. When a J-Res enters your field, put 2+1/+1 counters on it. Tree of Decay does not have a passive effect like that. It just has the put X cards. In Tree of Decay's case, it's X cards from your grave into your removed area, and then your opponent loses X hundred life. In the case of Tree of Growth, you gain X hundred life. So Tree of Growth, Tree and Decay, you're supposed to get 1 tree out each for free, just to kind of have that way to loop between your RFG and your grave consistently. They both also play for value neutral. Tree of Growth draws you a card, so you don't actually go down in card value. Tree of Decay, your opponent discards a card, so your opponent loses 1 card, right? So it's good to have them in the deck. The good thing about Tree of Growth is it also works with Oborozuki, because Oborozuki wants to remove +1/+1 counters from it. So this just makes it come into play with them already, like, applied, basically, just for free. And then it'll also get more counters on top of that, even if you have nothing already. So even if you have nothing in your grave or RFG immediately, if you play an Oborozuki, or if you play a Tree of Growth, and then you order an Oborozuki, you will get 2+1/+1 counters from Tree of Growth, and then you'll get another 2 from Obo's effect, which can give a whole board -8/-8 if you remove all the counters. So it has a very... It can be very impactful as a game goes on in terms of tempo and just overall strength of your cards. So it's much more powerful than Tree of Decay. However, again, in order to get the free play, in order to have all those other effects to remove cards from the grave, etc., etc., you have to be under Rebirth. So you have to have the Order of Death and Rebirth in play. It can't be on Athena's front side. Death and Rebirth. So Death and Rebirth, Darkness and Wind, quick cast. Your opponent banishes any non-magic stone, non-J-ruler entity. We kind of had that in Athenia Enters the Game of Gods already, but I think it's specifically they banish a resonator. And if they don't, they discard a card. In this case, if they just don't have one, they just don't banish any of those. Death. So the front side effect is, as an additional cost, you can remove X cards in your grave from the game, and then your opponent banishes X more entities. So the Death and Rebirth can function as a field wipe, which is pretty prevalent. And a banish field wipe is a lot more powerful than a destruction field wipe because it gets around stuff like Eternal. The other thing with it is it being quick cast. I don't think we've had a board wipe banish, like your opponent banishes quick cast, in I think ever. So it's a very powerful potential removal tool. The rebirth effect is you put Y cards back from your RFG into play, and then you can recover up to Y magic stones you control. The rebirth side is interesting, specifically because there's going to be a lot of ways to go mana positive off of her rebirth effects. We've already kind of seen it in Athenia Enters the Game of Gods, the way you get cards into the RFG earliest through stuff like Attendant of Asmodeus, and then you can kind of put all... And Attendant of Asmodeus already goes mana positive with 3 stones, so you can go back and forth over and over and over again. So it can just give you a whole lot of additional mana. So it'll be interesting to see how Athenia kind of plays with that kind of playstyle. However, again, the thing to note, this has to be on the flip side. So you have to have something revolutioned in order to get that effect. I can't believe they did this. I truly cannot believe they did this. They were already memeing hard enough with Mechanized Fenrir, and then this card got released. I saw this card's name and thought someone had made like a meme. And I was like, that's a pretty funny meme. But then I realized it wasn't a meme. So Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious Flame. Blue and red. You gain 10 dragon power. You have no maximum hand size until end of game. No maximum hand size. Pretty good passive effect, honestly. And then the you gain 10 dragon power. Also very good. And then draw X cards where X is your dragon power divided by 10, rounded down. So the thing about Super Flame, it's good that there are more than just like 2 ways to gain dragon power. So I think the 2 ways we've seen to gain dragon power so far, and I could be wrong about this, is the chant that's can't be chased, or maybe it can't be canceled. It's one of the 2. It's 2 CMC, it's like red and 1, and then you gain 10 dragon power and draw a card. Now we have another one that gains you 10 dragon power as well, and then your ruler flip gives you 5. And then I think we have Pang Tong that like doubles it, or something like that. We have a lot of ways to gain dragon power. The issue that Dragonflame might run into primarily is going to be in the mana sink required to gain that dragon power, right? Because all of the dragon power type effects, right? So we'll just go look at them, right? So this one gives you 10 dragon power, you have no maximum hand size, and then you draw. So it's a value play, right? And then if we scroll down, I don't think this guy gives you dragon power. He does not. And then if we scroll down, Peng Tong gives you some. We go to the next page. This one, you gain 10 dragon power, this card can't be cancelled, draw another card. And then it's just the flip off of Dragonflame. When we've seen in the payoffs, right, none of the payoff cards actually produce you dragon power. So like, what do I mean by that? So like the increase in dragon power and then Super Flame, they're both drawing you cards, they're both netting you value and advantage, but they're not actually doing anything. They're just setting up for your other cards that require dragon power in order to do stuff. And then in order to having to make that kind of mana investment in order to play Super Flame and then play increased dragon power and play those, they're both 2 CMC, right? Play those 2 CMC cards, and then not do anything with those effects won't be super impactful to your gameplay. Because like take Dragonflame Enters the Game of Gods. It's only 1 mana, but it's not doing anything until you have dragon power. You don't start the game with dragon power. That we've seen so far. There might be cards that allow you to start the game with dragon power, but that we've seen so far. So you're not starting, so it doesn't do anything on 1. You're not generating dragon power until turn 2 at least, unless you have Energized to order something early. So you're already not doing anything with any of your payoff until turn 3 at the earliest. So it can just it just seems a little unfortunate with how that design has gone. It's an interesting concept, especially with how quickly he gains dragon power. I didn't expect there to be 2 separate cards that give him 10 each, honestly. But we'll just have to kind of see where that goes. If the game slows down, right? Like if the game slows down a lot, we get rid of all of this quick mana boosting, etc., get rid of 1 mana counter spells except for specific rulers, like things like that. Things that I talked about in what I would want from a ban list type video from my stream the other week. We might see this card see play, this deck see play, but currently it won't serve much in either format, either Wander or New Frontiers. Conclave at Dragon Mountain. I think this card is cracked out of its mind, but I could be wrong. There are a couple reasons why I think this card is cracked out of its mind. One, you don't immediately discard the 3 cards. So if you're playing, right, the Isis combo deck, the Magical Dragon combo deck, like those types of deals, which are already in red mana, you're just drawing extra cards for free, and then you're already just slapping your whole hand onto the field and then telling your opponent to do something. You're not really holding up interaction. And you can kind of play through interaction in those decks. So for those decks, it seems kind of nuts. At worst, this card is a -1 in value. At best, it's a +2. Because the other thing is, if you just put your entire hand into play, right, after playing Conclave, there's nothing to discard anymore. So that's the first thing about Conclave. The second thing about Conclave is we've now seen... we've had a lot of decks in the past, and currently, that kind of revolve around graveyard recursion, and just being able to do things with things in the grave. Conclave at Dragon Mountain accelerates that. So if I play Conclave, I can put cards that I would normally dump with Mikage Rhea. If it's New Frontiers, and I can use the red mana. For Athenia, she's technically Jund colors, right? She's red, darkness, or fire, darkness, and wind. With Athenia, I can put 3 cards in my grave that I want there immediately to potentially remove, to resurrect, things like that she's already doing, with red being her 3rd kind of unprimary color. It can use to filter certain cards. If I don't like the cards in my hand, I can get better ones, right? It's very good. It's also good in Dragonflame, specifically because Dragonflame has Zhuge Liang, but I don't know if Zhuge Liang is required specifically in Dragonflame, if that makes sense. Because Zhuge Liang gets extra benefits for being a dragon, but I think her best effects don't require anything attached to Dragonflame. And so she can let you play stuff like this because she cheats mana. So we'll see what kind of decks come up with Conclave. It kind of combos with the next card, Typhonomachy. That's a funny name, actually. I didn't realize that. But we'll see what people come up with Conclave. But those are like initial thoughts on where people can use Conclave. And my initial thoughts are this card is obscene, but I'm willing to be proven wrong. At least obscene in the right decks. I don't think it's like find a way to fit 4 Conclave into every deck you're playing, regardless of its mana color, or its primary mana color. But in the decks that it would be good in, I think it is very, very, very good in. So Typhonomachy, if you're unfamiliar with, is it Norse? I think it's Norse mythology, like Odin, Thor, Loki, that whole deal. They have something called, or maybe it's Greek. Oh no, it is Greek. It's Greek. I'm pretty sure it's Greek. It's called like Titanomachy or something. It's to do with them like fighting the Titans, dying to the Titans, things like that. So it's funny that they decided to do Typhonomachy with Zeus versus Typhon. Just a funny naming scheme. So it's 4 mana, light, light, darkness, darkness. Each player puts as many non-magic stone, non-enchant cards with different printed names as they can from their grave into the field, and then the cost of this is light, darkness instead of its printed cost in all zones. So if referenced, it only is 2 CMC. Typhonomachy combos with Conclave, and there's another card that combos with Conclave. Other things that Typhonomachy can do with Conclave, again, it's a singleton deck, so bear with this on how consistent this is, but Typhonomachy, if you go turn 1 Conclave with some form of 5-color stone or whatever, turn 1 Conclave, you dump Alice's World, Final Stance, and some other card into the grave. And then on your second turn, your opponent does whatever. On your next turn, you Typhonomachy, you get 2 cards that say take an extra turn, and then 1 other card. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be a griffin, could be something ridiculous. And then you get to take 2 more turns after your opponents. And so you go up 2 more stones, technically, and then you can kind of do whatever you want. So I think this card is very, very strong in Zeus. The other thing with this being in Zeus is I think the raw value you will get from casting Typhonomachy off of either Conclave early or late when you're at Union 7 with new 12 Olympians is going to be obscene. With what we've seen from the new 12 Olympian enters, I don't think there's any other set of enters in the game that could potentially be as powerful as all of them. So it'll be interesting to see like this resolve. Like if you ever see a Typhonomachy resolve on stream in like a GP, the Zeus player is probably winning, which is really funny to think about. There could be decks that try and play around this. I mean, in that case, the Zeus player just doesn't play it. But like if they're playing a Mikage Seijiro Game of Dreams style deck that we used to see with like Carlina and Harvesting Season and Wanderer, like there's that kind of potential. But in order to kind of play around Typhonomachy, I don't know if a lot of decks will be doing that. I think the one that'll probably have the best chance is Athenia. It just needs to have enough payoff cards, and I don't know if the payoff of any set of enters in the game will be as high as Union 7 12 Olympians being active. So it'll be interesting to see. And then again, just the other thing with like taking extra turns, kind of nuts. Thunder of Zeus. So a 5 mana chant. I'm interested that this card is a normal. I wouldn't have expected it to be a normal, but it's probably... You probably play one of this. You could cut this card, I think, from a Zeus deck, but I think you probably play one of this. So for each entity you control with 1 or more races, you choose one of those races, and then you pay 1 less to play this card for each different race chosen this way. A couple things with this. One, if you have Zeus ordered, the card, or you have Order of the Olympians in play, the card it is ordering is also a new 12 Olympian, so you can use that as one of the races if you need to. All of the like additions that have traits, so like the moons, the demonic worlds, things like that, if any of those could potentially fit into the deck, those can also count towards your races. Cards with multiple races serve good effects. And then just like other resonators that are just good one-ofs, right? Like Lorite's an elf. You're not going to really have much elf overlap in a singleton deck. Things like that. So I think you could probably get this around to 2 mana fairly easily when you would want to play it as kind of like a big payoff card. And I think 2 mana for 2 of those effects is pretty efficient, because it can be a cancel and a burn. 2,000 damage is nothing to snuff at. If you're Typhon it is, but if you're any other ruler it's not. Just straight up kills Belial, right? Cancel target spell or activate or automatic ability. Another 3-pronged cancel, basically, very strong. Your opponent discards 2 cards, you draw 2 cards, you gain 2,000. So this could be a +3 in value. You draw 2, your opponent discards 2. You could draw 2, cancel a spell, so it goes up 2 in value and you stop something. Deal 2,000, it can be used as a game ender. You can gain 2,000, can prevent you from losing the game, right? So I think it has a lot of application in Zeus, and because Zeus is singleton, you're kind of looking for just decent applicable cards that can be used relatively easily. And I think Thunder's fine. Again, you might end up cutting it. It might just be too hard to get the races into play in order to make it as cost effective as it needs to be. But I don't think it's something you're looking to play. Like, I mean, if you could play it turn 1, sure. But, like, it is impactful enough to be played in the late game, where you're not really bent out of shape by not being able to cast it in the first couple turns, and then just using it as kind of like an endgame bomb, sort of like you would in something like Limited, is pretty good. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the spoilers from the past week. Hopefully we will see some more over the next week. I'll do another video next Friday, and then pre-release should be that week. No, not next Friday. The Friday after, I think, is pre-release. So I think we have like 2 more weeks of spoilers, 1.5 more weeks of spoilers, and then we'll start seeing the full set and everything. All right, thank you all so much for watching. Do look forward to my tournament breakdown video. I'll probably be releasing that sometime tomorrow, just gathering some more information for myself before I actually end up making it. But thank you all so much again. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.